Okay, so now we're going to talk about instrumental or operant conditioning. You can use either word, they're both correct. And this is the voluntary behavior that we talked about in the last video. So with instrumental conditioning, we have a couple of terms. First, we are talking about rewards and reinforcers. Rewards or reinforcers increase behavior, and that is what makes them a reinforcer. Sometimes we give a reward and we just assume it's going to increase behavior. That's the whole point. So it's actually a reinforcer if it increases behavior. Okay? Punishment is intended to decrease behavior. Okay? So anything that's a punishment is something that is taking away or lessening behavior. Okay, so typically we think about punishment with a child. A child is acting up. We want to decrease that behavior, so we deliver some sort of punishment, right? Okay, so for both of these, we have negative and positive. All right, negative means we're taking something away, not the behavior, something like a reward. Okay, for negative, we're taking something away, and for positive, we're adding something. So for a reinforcer, we are giving something for positive, we are taking it away for negative. But both of them are increasing behavior. So we're trying to have somebody do something more frequently, and so maybe we pay them, right? Taking something away might be if you behave today in school, I will not give you any homework. So I'll take away the homework for today, right? Okay, so that's for increasing behavior. And then decreasing behavior, what we normally think of as punishment is positive punishment, like applying something negative, giving something negative, some sort of negative consequence, but it's actually giving something. So something like something physical that is applied to, we talk about training animals like with a shock. So if you have a dog and you know about shock collars, so a shock is a punishment for stepping over a boundary. So that's a positive punishment. Even though it's the word positive, it just means that you're adding something. It doesn't mean it's like a positive thing, right? Okay, so for negative, we're taking something away, and this is the typical, you didn't do your chores, and so I'm not letting you have whatever it is that you want, your time on your video games or something, right? So here's an example, speeding tickets. So we think about speeding tickets and try to decide whether it's a reward, whether it's a punishment, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, right? Okay, so first we ask, what is the goal? Is the goal to increase behavior or decrease behavior? And with speeding tickets, the goal is to decrease speeding, right? So the goal is to decrease behavior. So we're talking about a punishment because we want to decrease behavior, right? Is something being added or something being taken away? This one's a little bit debatable. We're giving a speeding ticket, right? Could be we're taking away your money, but we would think of this as more as positive punishment. We're giving a speeding ticket. Okay, does it work? Does the speeding ticket work? Think about why or why not. Does the threat of a speeding ticket work? Usually my discussions in class surround the deterrent factor, so you have to actively avoid a speeding ticket. You need to be thinking about actively avoiding a speeding ticket for it to control your speed. If you've gotten a lot of speeding tickets and you're starting to feel the hit, you may be slowing down your behavior. If you've never gotten one, but you've been speeding a lot all the time and you've never gotten a speeding ticket, the threat of speeding tickets is not going to decrease your speed. Maybe if you get one, maybe it will. Maybe it won't. There's, think about all the other factors involved there. So thinking about texting and driving, what happens when we text and drive? Most people, nothing happens, right? there's no punishment. Every now and then, someone gets in a terrible accident. So maybe if you know somebody that happened to, maybe something like that might deter you. The laws might deter you. Getting in trouble for it might deter you. Unfortunately, there's so many incidences where we're texting and driving and nothing happens that people continue to do that behavior, even though the consequences are phenomenal for when something bad does happen. So some more examples. A teacher calling on a student who's raising their hand. Me, calling me, right? So think about it both ways. Are we trying to increase or decrease behavior? What's the goal? Okay, so think about which person we're talking about. So if we're talking about the student raising their hand and we want to take that away, that's something annoying. We're trying to decrease that behavior, right? So the teacher calling on the student and trying to decrease that child's behavior would actually be thought of as punishment because we are so because we're adding something and trying to take something away. But so that doesn't really make much sense in this question because the child wants to raise their hand. So actually what we're doing, instead of punishing the child for raising their hand, because we're not really taking something away, we're not really adding something that they want. You have to think about that reward. Is it something that they want, or is it something that they don't want? And if they want to be called on, which I'm guessing they do because they raised their hand, they are actually getting a reward. So that is one thing I didn't mention earlier. When you're thinking about the reward or the punishment, it has to be, if it's a punishment, you're taking away something good. And if you're adding something for a punishment, it's something that the person doesn't want, right? So for this case, you've got a child raising their hand. It's annoying to the teacher. The teacher calls on the student, and the student gets rewarded for raising their hand in this annoying way, right? So you're basically increased that behavior of the child. The teacher might have wanted to decrease the behavior, but they've inadvertently increased the chances of that child doing that again by calling on them. Okay? Now, if you think about the teacher's point of view, so the teacher is actually going to be punished for calling on the student because the student's going to do the annoying thing again. The behavior of calling on the student, so that's when we think about it normally. If we think about like, okay, the teacher's going to be punished because they're going to raise their hand again. That's not the right answer there. Okay, the teacher is not actually going to. A punishment for the teacher would mean that we'd be decreasing the calling on the student, right? But actually, what's happening is when the student stops raising their hand and stops being annoying, right, removes that rewards the teacher. So the teacher is calling on the student because they want to stop that annoying behavior. So they call on the student and they get rewarded for calling on the student because it was taken away. So that's a negative reinforcement. Okay? It's a little more complicated than you realize at first. So you have to really think about some of these examples. So a parent giving candy to a toddler to stop crying. Okay, so the parent is giving the candy to the toddler, giving candy to the toddler, and asking them to stop crying, right? So they stop crying and they get the candy. What have we just done? Have we increased or decreased the chances of that toddler crying again the next time we're in the store? Right, so the next time we're in a store, that toddler's going to cry again, and we're going to continue to reward them by giving them candy, right? So also from the parent's perspective, the parent has been rewarded, and the parent behavior of giving candy has been reinforced by taking away the crying. So that's a negative reinforcement on the parent's behavior because we've taken away that annoying crying. Okay? All right. So Next slide. Oh, sorry, that's not supposed to happen. All right, let's think about habits. So with a habit, if you are trying to break a bad habit, you want to think about what is the reward for that behavior that you're doing. Okay, what is the thing that's reinforcing that behavior, that's keeping that behavior in place? And the more you do it, the more it's reinforced, the stronger that habit is. So same thing if you want to build a new habit, you want to think about how you can reinforce that behavior that you want to start doing. Okay? So it becomes a habit if you keep getting reinforced for it or reinforcing yourself for it, or something really good happens because you are doing that thing. Okay? So then think about what happens when the reward doesn't come, or the reward makes you sick, or something else, right? So then it's hard to keep doing that behavior if there's no good outcome there. And the reward could just be, I feel good, I'm eating healthy food, I feel good. That's a reward, right? That's a reinforcement. So typically what would happen is the behavior would sort of die off if there was never any more reinforcement. So if we want to change behavior, we want to take away reinforcements. So if you have a behavior that you want to stop, you need to figure out what is reinforcing in your environment and how to take that away. Okay, so this is hard to do. Many behaviors that we have are learned or reinforced through classical or operant conditioning. There is also something missing here, which is cognition. That the original classical and operant conditioning theories don't take into account your thoughts about it. So your predictions, your emotions around it, etc. So think about punishment and avoiding aversive consequences like a speeding ticket or texting and driving. Think about when avoidance actually works. And I mean, the reality is that punishment does not work as well as reinforcement for changing behavior. So for that very reason. All right, just real quick on social learning theory and observational learning. We are talking about when you learn from watching somebody else. So learning can happen even if you aren't experiencing the actual reward or you aren't experiencing the actual behavior. This is how children learn from watching adults, or we learn from watching a YouTube video on how to do something, right? Even if though we're not actually doing it. But these things there's certain things that have to take place, right? One is you have to be paying attention to the thing that's happening, okay? You have to be able to retain that information, and then you have to mimic the behavior or reproduce the behavior, okay? The more you do it, the more you will retain it in your memory. You also need to have some sort of motivation. You have to want to learn it, or you have to be getting some sort of reinforcement. Now, reinforcement with observational learning can be vicarious reinforcement. So if you have a child in a classroom, for example, and we see that, and the child sees that other children are getting reinforced for their behaviors, then that child will begin to do that behavior also. That's called vicarious reinforcement. They get motivated and they want to do that behavior because they see other people getting rewarded for it. So that happens for good and bad behaviors. So if children are being paid attention to because they are acting up, other children will then act up. So if children are getting rewarded for behaving the way that the teacher wants them to behave, then the other children learn that that's what gets paid attention to. Okay. Okay, so observational learning and instrumental learning are related, but not the same thing. So with instrumental and operant conditioning, you need to, the person is actually doing the behavior and getting reinforced for it. With observational learning, the person is watching the behavior and learning how to do the thing, or learning to do the thing by watching somebody else get reinforced for it. Okay? basic concepts that actually are more complicated, but this is pretty much the level that you need to know it at. Okay, thank you.